Today is part 3 of a series on US-China relations and the race for global influence. If you want to see part 1 or part 2, hit the link beneath this video. Let's get into it. Now, over the last 2 weeks, we have examined China's and the United States' attempts to stake claims on the future. Through its Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI, China's provided over $1 trillion in infrastructure loans to 150 countries, mainly in the emerging economies of Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. Now, the United States, by contrast, does not provide infrastructure loans. They provide weapons materials, and weapons technologies in order to strengthen foreign governments it likes, fund opposition to those it doesn't, and build future credit with favorable nations. And today, 150 infrastructure loans for China. The United States has weapons contracts with 103 countries for comparison. Now, each superpower is, in effect, seeking the same thing, right? Future global influence. Chinese infrastructure loans are far more than debt agreements, and US weapon sales are far more than simple purchase orders. Whether it's a bridge or a tank, the fine print of these deals always includes strategic, geopolitical, and trade agreements, right? China wants allies in a future, or maybe present, standoff with the United States, and the United States wants the same in a potential conflict with China. But despite the best efforts of both of these superpowers, geopolitical agreements are never binding. And as I expressed in last week's video, geopolitics is not so much about what you did for me yesterday as it is about what you can do for me tomorrow. And of all the needs of tomorrow, none is more important or more urgent than energy.
This is Jay Martin.
A healthy man wants 1,000 things. A sick man only wants one. That's a quote from Confucius. And for a nation, there is no sickness worse than an energy crisis. A healthy nation, like energy rich, they can focus on broad policy goals, innovation, social programs, climate commitments, and defense modernization, whatever they want. But a sick nation, energy starved, scrambles just to keep the lights on, scrambles to keep factories running. GDP contracts, inflation soars, and public unrest grows. Think of Germany and France in 2022. Both of these countries had broad goals to phase out fossil fuels and lead the world towards clean and renewable energy by the 2030s. But when the invasion of Ukraine compromised their supply of Russian natural gas and their renewable energy infrastructure wasn't built yet, both countries ended up fast-tracking the restart of both their lignite coal mining operations and coal-fired power plants. The leaders of the clean energy movement ran back to dirty coal. Why did they do that? Really simple, because governments facing an energy crisis stop thinking in decades and start thinking in days. Look at Sri Lanka, also in 2022. Sri Lanka's tourism-dependent economy was one of the worst hit during the COVID era. They struggled to recover, and by 2022, the Sri Lankan government actually defaulted on $51 billion worth of debt. Now, this is important because Sri Lanka imports over 50% of its total energy, and literally 100% of its hydrocarbon-based energy, such as oil and gas. So no cash, no credit, that means no energy for Sri Lanka. So what happened? Well, fuel shortages led to the suspension of fuel sales to non-essential vehicles. You and I could no longer fill up our tank. 15-hour blackouts became the norm. Hospitals had to shut down. Now, mass protests followed, culminating in the storming of the presidential residence. And 3 days later, the president with his wife ended up fleeing the country. A country with abundant, cheap energy has 1,000 ambitions, but a country in an energy crisis only has one: survival. Whether you are an emerging nation or Europe's economic powerhouse, an energy shortage will cripple you. Now, how does this fit into the China-US balance? Here's one way to look at it. Although the world will find, I believe, renewable zero-emission energy at some point in the future, in the meantime, over 90% of global transportation still runs on petroleum products. Gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, aviation, shipping, and trucking are all virtually 100% oil dependent. Without oil, global logistics collapse overnight, and every single military on Earth relies on oil. period. According to the International Energy Agency's 2023 reports, oil and natural gas account for roughly 55% of global energy consumption. But it's about far more than just transport. Roughly 10 to 15% of global oil demand goes into petrochemicals, meaning plastics, fabrics, cosmetics, medicines, detergents, and more, all heavily oil dependent. Oil remains the most traded commodity in the world by dollar value. The global oil trade's worth about $2 to $3 trillion per year. That's more than all metals and minerals markets combined. So for today, there's no more strategic resource than hydrocarbons. And the United States, as it so happens, is the world's largest producer of oil. And also by a very wide margin, they're the largest producer of natural gas. That is security. Now, important to note, while the United States produces more oil than either Saudi Arabia or Russia, both of those nations actually have larger reserves, meaning they pump less for now, but they've got a lot more left in the tank. And this is important. I'll explain why in a minute. But before we get into that, let's step back and tie this into the bigger picture. At the start of this video series, I compared China's Belt and Road Initiative to the United States' web of weapons deals. Both are ways of securing influence over future markets and political alliances. But here's the catch. China can continue rolling out Belt and Road Initiative without the United States. They don't need America's permission or participation. But the United States, however, cannot continue making advanced weapons without China's rare earth processing capacity. This is critical and a very underappreciated point. More than 78% of the US military weapons rely on Chinese materials, and that's a bit of a pickle. Now, you may never have heard of minerals like samarium, gadolinium, terbium, scandium, but the simple math is this. These are rare earth elements, and every F-35 jet requires 900 pounds of these. A Navy warship like the Destroyer, 5,200 pounds each, and a Virginia-class submarine requires nearly 10,000 pounds. So no minerals, no military for the United States. Now, acutely aware of this, the Pentagon and the Department of Defense have invested over $400 million into domestic rare earth supply chains since 2020. And companies like MP Materials, a key American rare earth miner, are trying to set up processing operations in the United States. But here's the hard truth. You can't simply flip a switch and become self-sufficient when it comes to rare earth processing. Why not? Because these are not short-term projects. They don't require hundreds of millions. They require billions of dollars. They require highly specialized engineers, metallurgists, chemists, and years of construction and testing. And therefore, most importantly, they require political will that lasts longer than a 4-year election cycle. Right now, the United States lacks that long-term stable commitment. As we know, one administration's favorite is the next administration's enemy. Everybody wants innovation, right? But very few people actually want a refinery in their backyard. And that's the problem facing the United States. So even as the United States gains access to rare earth elements, either at home or in friendly nations, it still lacks the infrastructure to turn those into usable components at scale. China, on the other hand, has been planning and executing on rare earth dominance for over 30 years. Now, for better or for worse, China's authoritarian system gives it an enormous advantage in building long-term industrial and resource strategies because they can move faster, they can plan in decades, and they can push through unpopular policies without public pushback. And that's why they own most of the world's processing capacity, roughly 90% of rare earth processing, and they increasingly control the downstream industries like battery manufacturing and EV manufacturing that rely heavily on those refined materials. So the United States wants to compete, therefore, it needs a shortcut. And this is what I was watching when the American president made his trip to Saudi Arabia a couple of weeks ago for the US-Saudi Investment Summit. Saudi Arabia has 3 things the United States desperately needs in this race. Number 1, political will. No elections, no shifting public sentiment, no NIMBYism, not in my backyard to slow projects down. Number 2, capital. Very deep pockets to fund big, ambitious projects. And number 3, increasingly, resource control. Saudi Arabia is pushing hard to develop its own mining and rare earth production industries as part of its Vision 2030 plan to diversify beyond oil. And conveniently, Saudi Arabia wants American weapons. So there's a deal to be done here. Now, during the investment summit, the media was hyper-focused on the American president receiving a $400 million airplane as a gift from the region. What they didn't cover nearly as much was that Ma'aden, a Saudi Arabia mining company, signed a memorandum of understanding with that American company, MP Materials, the US rare earth materials company, to create a fully integrated end-to-end rare earth supply chain within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So by partnering with a kingdom like Saudi Arabia, the US can effectively borrow the speed and resolve that it lacks at home. And this is why the emerging US-Saudi partnership, resource partnership, matters so much. It's about rebuilding the backbone of America's industrial and military future in a world where China controls more and more of the critical inputs. If America wants to stay competitive, it needs allies who bring speed, who bring scale, and most importantly, who bring staying power. And right now, the clearest path runs through Riyadh. Saudi Arabia has been aggressively and successfully building out the 3 pillars of its Vision 2030 plan. Now, these are, number 1, maintain energy dominance. This is oil. Oil is still the engine of the Saudis' GDP and sovereign wealth. And Aramco is one of the most valuable countries on the planet. Number 2, industrial development. Think manufacturing of logistics and high technology. This includes mega projects like the NEOM. You should check this out. If you haven't, looked at the NEOM project, N-E-O-M. It's a very interesting city in the desert. Think smart cities, think logistics hubs, and advanced technology manufacturing zones. And the 3rd pillar is mining. Now, with the goal to become a global hub for mineral exploration, refining, and downstream production, the Ma'aden MP Minerals deal is a big part of this 3rd pillar. Saudi Arabia is also strategically located at the intersection of Africa, Asia, and Europe, enabling it to capitalize on the 3rd step from our energy supply chain framework from last week's video, infrastructure and distribution. As a reminder from last week's video, the 3rd step in the energy supply chain is infrastructure and distribution. Energy isn't useful if it's stuck in one place. It needs to travel through pipelines, that's oil and gas, power grids, or shipping routes and ports. Think coal, LNG, uranium, and batteries. Now, whoever owns these roads dictates the traffic, and that's what makes this stage so strategic. As I watch this develop, I can't help but wonder who needs whom more between the United States and Saudi Arabia, and how that dynamic will shift over the next 10 years. And more near term, how will the US-Saudi deals mature under the next American administration? If history is precedent, and it is, the next administration is usually ideologically opposite from the current one. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. That's all for today. I'll see you next week.
Most investors think they're playing it safe, following mainstream advice, chasing trends, and clinging to the herd mentality. But there is nothing safe about mainstream advice. The smartest investors know that real wins come from thinking independently and spotting opportunities long before the crowd. And that's what we teach at the Commodity University. This is an exclusive membership designed to arm you with the skills from the sharpest minds in the mining investment world. Each of our professionals has a proven track record of finding trends before anyone else. At the Commodity University, you'll gain access to a highly curated and growing catalog of courses covering what you actually need to know to become an informed commodity investor. Every single month, you'll receive a brand new course packed with insights from the best in the business, giving you the edge to stay ahead. If you're tired of following the crowd and ready to invest smarter, think sharper, and understand the mining industry like the professionals, then take the next step and join the Commodity University today.